Good evening. This is the last sort of session of the day in this room. So I just want to introduce you to this session. This is Building Trust and Enabling Innovation for Voice-Enabled IoT. And our speaker is Lynn Turwards. This is that particular session. If that's not what you were expecting to hear, then you're in the wrong room. Otherwise, welcome. A couple of reminders. Essentially, if you haven't picked up your merchandise, I believe the sale is on, and so go and do that fairly quickly. I think they shut at 6 o'clock this evening. There is the Arsenal reception. Oh, well, that's going on now, but you should be able to still get access to that after this session. And just a reminder, if you've got a cell phone, if you could put it on vibrate, please, and then that way we save disturbing everybody. But without further ado, I'll hand it over to Lynn.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. Hi, my name is Lynn Turwards. I'm the Executive Director for the Executive Women's Forum, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what the EWF is all about when we get into the launch of the Voice Privacy Toolkit. These are things that you probably inherently know, but I just wanted to make sure you got some sense that in our movement from going from keyboard to a microphone, from typing to using our voice as a primary modality and for input, our journey started at about 1952, and that was the first voice recognition device, and it could recognize single digits. So if I said 1, it could convert that my saying 1 into text, and then translate that into a screen that came back with the digit 1. Okay? So if we fast forward, because I don't really need to walk you through the whole history here, but if we fast forward, today, I just listed some of the voice-enabled devices that are out there. And I'm going to pick out a couple of them just because I think they're really interesting and you may not have heard of them. Hello Barbie is a toy. Mattel is in a significant way partnered with other companies in this space to provide toys that children can interact with. And I have a Hello Barbie. I've had one since January, and it's been quite fun. It helped me to understand some of the challenges, not only from a technology perspective, but also social issues as well. The Scully Smart Helmet, too, is quite interesting, especially if you're thinking about, how do we manage IoT in general in the enterprise. This is a very cool motorcycle helmet, Bluetooth enabled, obviously hands-free ability to take calls, but also it has a 180-degree camera in the back. So if you're Boeing Corporation, any other kind of manufacturing where actually video in the enterprise is not such a great thing, like on the manufacturing floor at Boeing, in my hometown Seattle, there may be some challenges in that space. Now, this is according to Jim Tully, it's a $6.4 billion business today and projected to be in US dollars $2 trillion by 2020. And I say that because with opportunity, there also comes risk. And I really want to focus on the opportunity piece of it and how we enable innovation and not stifle it. And that's primarily what my talk is about today. So, I believe that the development community has a tremendous opportunity here to innovate and to change people's lives in a very positive way, and to fundamentally change the way we interact with technology. You don't have to teach customers how to type here. You don't have to teach someone how to speak. So the way they're going to be able to interact with your devices will come naturally to them. So there's no new habit. And I think that, embedding a voice, into IoT, you're going to be able to capture data you couldn't get with, the typing, with the keyboard. Just when you think about the way Amazon Echo is in a person's home, in your environment, and a part of your life. That's a very different relationship and interaction with technology. So I don't know how, I'm curious, is anyone here doing development today in the IoT space and the software and the devices? Anyone here? Okay, a few hands. Okay, great, thank you. Obviously, voice can be used for many things, and I think we're all familiar with the first one, recognition. It's widely applied. That's what I talked about since 1952. Biometrics is something that's emerging. I don't know if you've been tracking the news, but Barclays Bank for phone banking has moved to voice recognition. So they're getting their phone banking customers to enroll in a program, if they so choose, to use their voice as a method of authentication to their account, as opposed to passwords. And I don't have to tell this audience that not only are there security implications here, but there are significant positive financial implications to a major financial institution like Barclays. And as you can imagine, as always, when we are in this innovative space, there's going to be a certain level of convergence that happens with other emerging technologies and existing technologies. But with it also comes risk. And, a voice is just something that's deeply personal. Personal in a way that I think there's going to be a much different basic human emotional response to how you handle a person's voice and the metadata associated with that than a person will react to with, for example, a social security number or a birth date. Customers already have a fundamental fear of, well, is my device listening to me? There's a lot of customer and consumer-focused questions that I think as an industry, we have a responsibility to answer up front so that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot in terms of our ability to innovate. Yes, a new attack vector, but a lot of the same old weaknesses. And I'll talk about this later on. I think, in terms of what we're doing with the Voice Privacy Alliance, we're really trying to not rinse and repeat the same old mistakes that we've looked at before in terms of security weaknesses and privacy concerns. And I think this last point is important. You may have heard this already. It came up in the news feeds that I read about the Barclays phone banking using voice authentication. You can change your password in the U.S. There's even a process to get a new social security number. But you're not going to change your voice. And another piece here too, I just want to point out to you, your voice is a point in time. In other words, my voice today, and if I'm doing phone banking, for example, with Barclays, my voice today in the enrollment process, I would give samples of my voice. 10 years from now, it's very likely as I age, I would have to resubmit those. Okay, so this is an important thing to remember. Voice will change over time, and it's one of the challenges as you're innovating in this space. You need to think about that dynamic. It's not a specific security concern necessarily. However, if I'm a bad guy, I certainly am going to take note of that because I will think about that enrollment process. I will think about the actual voice authentication in ways that will, in what ways I can compromise that. So at the end of the day, it's a matter of trust, okay? So what I want is to foster an environment where we can build trust and not stifle innovation. I don't want to see, serious incidents. It's not just about a single company in today's environment. We live in a broader context, and what that means is, as we innovate in this space, if one vendor experiences a serious security incident, it's going to have a ripple effect across our industry. We've known this from lessons in the past. But we also know that a lot of the security and privacy concerns from the past, we carry that baggage with us today. And I don't want to rehash previous, security guidance, especially developer security guidance in this talk. You'll see that we focus specifically on voice-enabled issues. And also, part of the trust here, it's not it's not just a technology problem. I think it's very important to think about customers and ways that you can educate them. Even in the way that a customer brings your device into their home and what that overall experience is like. That's an opportunity, not necessarily a risk only, for you to build a relationship with your customer, okay, in a way that's very natural for that person. So educate them. And we also have to educate the press, because a lot of the headlines that I see is, oh, you know, your devices are listening to you and terrible things might happen. So we've got to get out of that the sky is falling mode, because fear is not a sustainable emotion. It's not something that will carry us forward. It's not a way to help us innovate. And we got to get rid of that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. What we've done is, so the Executive Women's Forum is the largest member organization for women in cybersecurity, privacy, and risk management. And 2 years ago, one of our members, Kelly Fitzsimmons, said, hey, she talked to us about there will be issues around voice and voice privacy and voice enabled devices and security concerns that people will have. And I think that in this group, you have an opportunity to show leadership and to do some innovative things in this space. So if you fast forward, at RSA, we launched the Voice Privacy Alliance, which is an industry group supported by the Executive Women's Forum. However, it's open to men and women. And the idea here is to provide thought leadership, to really foster and help people innovate, and obviously save time and money, and to provide tangible deliverables. So one of the tangible deliverables is what I'm talking about today, and that is a toolkit for developers. But we also have some folks in the legal space that are trying to get ahead of what we will know are legal issues around this, and consumer education. So our Twitter handle is @voiceprivacy, and you can email us directly, voiceprivacy@ewf-usa.com. So let me tell you a little bit about the toolkit. Today it stands at 41 Agile security stories. I chose that because what I liked about it is it begins with a customer point of view. So it highlights a customer concern, and then it talks about, for the developer, the specific controls that he or she should or could look at. It can be adapted for any development methodology. It really doesn't matter. It focuses specifically on voice-enabled IoT. I did not want to rehash other security guidance that you've received from, SANS, OWASP, and so on. And it is meant, the idea here is you're looking to innovate in this space. You're a developer, maybe you're a product manager, maybe you're a frontline developer, tester, UI, whatever you're doing, UX, whatever you're doing, you should be able to take this, look at it, and say, okay, somebody has eased the security tax and burden on me, because primarily my job is to deliver an innovative product. And what I need is the kind of support and help to get me started on embedding security in the proper, whatever the proper time is for in my development life cycle. So I'm hoping that's happening early on, but I know practically that doesn't always happen that way. We encourage you to join the Voice Privacy Alliance and to improve this toolkit. It's for developers. I'm hoping the people in this room represent that community and are willing, after I go through some of the security stories, to look at it and provide feedback and say, yes, I can use that. That's very helpful. Or no, actually, I need more information here. Or here are other ways or other tools that you could provide to us. So this is a sample from the toolkit. So if you can imagine here, it's a PDF file. It's a table that provides you the security story in Agile format. There's guidance, and then if there are additional notes or information, that's another column. Originally, I had other columns in there to identify, product managers, priority, to be able to categorize or flag. We took those out because we made the decision that development teams really, you don't need that kind of help. What you need is the meat here and the guidance. How you adapt it is up to you. So, we know from customer feedback and press that people have this idea that the device is always listening to me. And there's some unease around that. And I think, from a development point of view, I think we need to think about this in terms of, what are you doing? Are you recording and taking a person's, what they say and storing that? Are you using that to authenticate to something else? What are you doing here? Or do we need to help customers understand that when I ask, when I ask Alexa what the weather is in Port Townsend, Washington, she's listening for a wake word, or what's called a phone name, right, to wake up the device, okay? And I even have a visual representation of the ring lights up. So, from my perspective, what's going on here is she's listening for the wake word, then just like in 1952, I fast forward to today, she hears and interprets what it is that I've said, converts that into text, right? And then it goes and gets a service that comes back and tells me what the weather is in Port Townsend. There's something about that process, which a lot of the voice-enabled products today do that is not a sky is falling situation. Okay, so as developers, I think there's lots of things that you can do to innovate in this space. When I think about Echo as an example, there are visual cues, there are there's a lot of things that Echo does that helps me to understand that I've given this sort of set of commands and I get these rote responses back. This isn't a live conversation, right? So it's the way I interact with the device. There are some things, though, from a developer's point of view, is how long, so when you're listening, how much is in that hardware and the buffer? Because at some point, customers and the media will get savvy and ask you that. Well, you're listening somehow, because how do you hear the wake word? Okay. We need to be ready to be transparent and let someone know that, there's a 30-second window of listening, and that I take that information and then that actually gets flushed out after I've gotten my weather information. If that is your scenario, there are ways for you to be able to communicate that to the customer and to think about that when you're designing the product. So I want to go on to some of these other ones here. We'll have time for questions. Customers fear that what they say is going to live forever somewhere, right, in the cloud and somewhere out there. It's just going to be forever. And if I say the wrong things, how do I take it back? There's a whole bunch of very basic human fears around this. And I think that I think that we have an opportunity here to be able to let customers know about how we capture, how we store, and when we get rid of their data. And if we are in a voice recognition situation, we also have the ability to let them know in regular customer terms, there's a time to live for all of this, and it's very short. So that whatever that outburst you had, that's not being recorded, because that's not how my product works. Okay? So here's the piece too. That's the Hello Barbie. This was a concern for me. It's a conversation that I had actually with their CISO. When I speak to Barbie, so first of all, it requires, again, an interaction. She's not always listening. She's not waiting for a phone name, nothing like that. I have to press a button on Barbie, and then she knows that there will be a voice interaction. So that's how I initiate that process. However, what I say to the Hello Barbie is actually, that doesn't get transmitted to Mattel. That gets transmitted to another company, okay? And that is interpreted, analyzed, and then Barbie responds to me, okay? And that happens very quickly. And, from a customer perspective, not necessarily the child that's interacting with the toy, But parents will have very emotional responses to, well, where's my child's data going? What are you doing with that? How are you processing that? And so here, it's just like other third-party management. You know, as developers, you know that you need to think about, if I'm transmitting that data to a third party, you know, end to end, what does that look like, right? There's a lot of scenarios in this space, but there's also this question of trust boundaries, which I know, you know, we've all heard of, we've all worked with before. We have to think about it in this context. So there's an interaction with a minor, really, right, with your device. Maybe it's Hello Barbie, it's another toy, and then that information then is being transmitted to a third party. You know, make sure that, you know, you understand the trust boundaries, you understand, you know, if that is, if that data needs to be encrypted in transit, if that data rests somewhere and is stored for a certain amount of time and analyzed, is that associated with that device? In the enrollment process, you know, how much do you know about the child, the consenting adult that set up, you know, in the beginning in the process of setting up Hello Barbie? There's a lot of, you know, it's so often in scenario-focused engineering, you think about it as the story, right? And I think that a lot of voice-enabled IoT is very is fit for that. You have to think about the story end to end, how you know, initiate you know, an interaction, and what happens all the way to the end, and including through to the response, and then what happens to not only the data but also the metadata. You know, especially around voice, it's very very important to think about these things. You know, can my voice-enabled device just respond to me? As wearables become more and more prolific, people will start asking this question because it'll occur to them that they're wearing a device that lives and breathes not only with them, but's taken to public spaces where, you know, is it possible, like with Echo, it's designed to respond to a phone. It doesn't matter. Echo doesn't know if it's me or someone else that's come into my home. Okay. Is that what you are designing into your product? Or is there a one-to-one relationship? And if so, how do you plan to establish that? So these are the types of things when you think about it, especially in threat modeling, you know, this is a good exercise, you know, and thought for that. You know, you've got to ask yourself, you know, am I recording people, you know, by happenstance? Is it just happening? And do I want it to? And what are the implications of that? I think that I'm trying to think about how we were at SciNet recently in New York. One of the questions too was, if I bring my voice-enabled device into work and into a business context, you know, what are the implications of managing that device too as well? So in other words, with dynamic conversations and the ability to record, are there implications there from an enterprise perspective? So customers are always going to know whether or not you are keeping up with current threats. I would say that I would hope that you would assume, as you're developing these products, that you know that inherently home networks are likely going to be insecure. And that means that your posture is you need to plan, design, and develop accordingly. You know, I think that customers are getting a better experience with their wireless networks in terms of guidance, but a lot of the guidance in here too is from a development perspective, how much of the security and privacy settings do you want to have control over out of the box? In other words, maybe you're going to set a certain standard that is appropriate for your product, and you're going to give customers options to be able to roll back on certain security and privacy settings. But one of the things I would really encourage you to think about is making, especially with voice-enabled IoT, is to make that secure out of the box in a way that is appropriate for your product and for your company and for your brand. The lost and stolen device here, I mean, you know, this idea, if I have physical access, you know, I own this, right? I think with voice-enabled devices. Physical access, and especially with wearables, you're going to get a lot more use cases where devices are lost, stolen, misplaced. Again, this is a place where customers can have a lot of trust and confidence in you, or they can really look at your product and think, you were never thinking about, how could you imagine that something that I would wear or hold wouldn't be easily lost or even potentially stolen. So, physical security, considerations here I think are very important. We're back at the OSI model. You just got to walk from the bottom of that stack all the way to the top and think about all the considerations from looking through the voice-enabled lens. So, communicating with customers, I think it's very important if your device communicates with the customer, how will your customer know if it's your device and not, an interloper or someone else? This is about the communication channel, this is really about how you authenticate not only people necessarily to a device, but also how devices authenticate to one another. This is a broader IoT I think, consideration, but I bring it into this conversation because, people will say, well, will the device respond to somebody else besides me? Can it start talking to other devices when I don't want it to? And we're back again to the same old of understanding trust boundaries, understanding how we identify people and the devices and how we authenticate. And a lot of this is, I bring up several times here is transport layer security, because it is one of the ways for you, to take sensitive data and to protect it in transit. And understand, too, with the size of the devices, I had one of my reviewers with the Denim Group, we had a good conversation around this. There is a tax and management issue, too, with, encryption on the device. And it's just the same old, too, with, if you're going to listen for a phone name and you have to buffer, there's a certain hardware and memory tax you're going to pay in order to capture that. So there's a lot of things you're going to balance here. It's not totally out of what you're used to, but I think there's additional, when I think about, what would be the checklist, if you will, of considerations that I need to think through as I, talk about and design my product. I think you're bringing all these things into that discussion, and I hope that that the sample here that I've given you gives you an idea of what that looks like and some of the considerations. So some thoughts here. Let's not repeat the same old mistakes. I've been in this business for over 20 years. I spent 10 years at Microsoft. I spent 2 years at Barclays Bank in London. I worked for Oracle in their Health Sciences Global Business Unit. Again, in this time, I feel that there's been a lot of rinse and repeat. And I think one of the, in putting this together, I think one of my primary drivers is to avoid that and to lessen the tax on the developers, because this is where the rubber meets the road, in my opinion. Okay? And you can let me know whether or not this is something that is useful to you. I want you, obviously, to embed security early in the development life cycle, but I want you to know that I truly believe this is going to save you churn and time, and thinking about, how do I update the hardware as well as the software? And, what am I storing in the hardware as opposed to the software? Things like that. The industry, obviously, you have an opportunity here to provide a leadership, ahead of the things that don't always make sense to us, right? Regulation that really isn't addressing the problem. Okay, not necessarily that all legislation is bad. Litigation is not just a problem here in the U.S., it's a problem worldwide. And obviously, we have to get ahead of all of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So we want to get ahead of the FUD. So why do we have the toolkit? That's why we have the toolkit. That's designed and it's meant to be dynamic. I'm looking for feedback from you, not only participation in helping make this toolkit better, but also some real feedback that says, you know what, you're right. In my development group, you're not trying to tell me what to do, but I'm getting what I would consider to be some of the guardrails or the rules of the road that help guide us in the development process so that we get ahead of potential issues as opposed to have to do cleanup on the back end. And, all the normal things, right? You need to have a response process. Somebody, maybe it's your product manager. You have to have focals in other parts of the company that worry about the regulatory stuff, the legal stuff, the compliance, and all of that. I tried to keep all of that out of the toolkit because it's just layers of tax when there are other people in your organization that really can probably, lend, expertise in areas that's their day job, right? Okay. So, I appreciate, your stamina in being here, but I also really encourage if there are questions, comments, observations. I wanted to flip real quickly to where this is located. So this lives, let's see here. Oops, it doesn't want to go there. All right, maybe I'll go back here. So this lives at www.ewf-usa.com/voice privacy. If you follow us on Twitter, I will tweet these out. We've had a number of reviewers. I want to continue the review process in the January-February time frame. I'm thinking about adding to the guidance, but also going deeper in certain areas, especially areas of concern. It's not something that the people that are working on this right now, we don't want to live in a bubble. We need, this is the time to throw rocks at it and shake it up and figure out how to make it better. Questions, comments? Yes. I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. There's a microphone right here, if you don't mind.
Hello? So voice is something that can easily be mimicked. So could that actually ever be a mechanism for something around authentication? And have you done any research around that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So voice impersonation attacks are on the rise, and if you just take a look at some of the articles about Barclays and phone banking using voice authentication, that issue has come up. So specifically, there is an enrollment process. So you need to have a proper sampling of a person's voice. Now, if I'm an attacker, you know darn well that I am going to try to interrupt that process, right? I'm going to get involved in that enrollment process because the first thing I'm going to do is I want to enroll as you. Maybe you are, a high wealth customer of Barclays doing phone banking. You bet you, I'm going to try to enroll as you. That's the first thing. Then the other piece of it is the bank now has this onus. They're involved in the fidelity of, is it Lynn or is it somebody else? And that's about acoustics, it's about environment. Do I have a cold? All kinds of things. Okay, so there are obviously sound experts that are involved in being able to not only verify that it's me and in my voice, but there are other products out there that take a look at whether or not I'm a fraudster based on other acoustic information, right? So it's possible that I'm a UK-based customer and I have no relationship whatsoever to, I don't know, to South America, for example. However, the hum on the line is a unique sound from telcos in South America, so something's not adding up right, and it's enough to alert for a potential fraud. I mean, these are things that are happening today in financial services, okay? Does that give some insight into? Okay. And in terms of the toolkit, I think that there's a whole different or additional set of guidance that would just be categorized in the authentication space, and I'm working on that in the V2, because that's a different piece. But the other piece, well, and let me ask you all of this. I mean, how many of you are, have projects or think you'll be developing in the voice authentication space as opposed to voice recognition? Anybody? Yes? Okay. Yes. Okay. Other questions, comments? Would you use this? Would you be able to use this? So we're not telling you what to do, but giving you the guidance around it and some of the issues, the security issues. Okay. All right. Thanks.